Hi, my name is Amy Jo, and thank you for joining me tonight. I've been doing a video series on the book of John, and in particular, I'm looking at the 7 I am statements that John records of Jesus. Jesus says, I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, I am the gate for the sheep, I am the good shepherd, I am the resurrection and the life, and I am the way, the truth, and the life, and I am the true vine. And then John also records 7 miracles of Jesus in his gospel, and they are Jesus turning water to wine, Jesus healing a sick boy who was dying, Jesus healing a crippled man, feeding 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, walking on the water, opening the eyes of a man born blind, and raising Lazarus from the dead. Today we're looking at Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, which is when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, or I am the resurrection and the life. And then later on he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Let's look at I am the way, the truth, and the life first. This is in John chapter 14, verses 6 through 7. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. And we're not really going to go into depth on this one. I feel like it's kind of summing up what Jesus has already said. I am the way sounds a lot to me like I am the gate for the sheep. I am the way into the flock. And I am the life sounds a lot like I am the resurrection and the life. And then Jesus also includes that he is the truth. And since this is a short video series, we just can't go into everything. So we're almost really, you could probably say we're skipping that one. But I think it is connected with what we're looking at today, which is John chapter 11. And in John chapter 11, this is like the turning point in the book of John. This is where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead and where he declares, I am the resurrection and the life. Before we read, though, I want to talk to you about other accounts of resurrection in the Bible. There are about 10 people or groups that are raised from the dead in the Bible. The first 3 occur in the Old Testament, and they're in the book of Luke. Jesus raises a boy from the dead, and in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he raises a girl from the dead, and it's probably the same girl in all 3 Gospels. Then we have John only records Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and then of course Jesus was raised from the dead. And at that time, there's just kind of really unique story about other people being raised from the dead, and I'm going to read that to you. Let's see. So it's at the end of the book of Matthew when Jesus is on the cross. Matthew writes, and when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. And you could say that that is kind of a foreshadowing of the future resurrection, which is another thing that we need to understand before we read this chapter. Christians believe that in the end, in the final day of judgment, that everyone will be raised from the dead, and it's at that time that we will be judged. Jesus actually talks about this earlier in the book of John. In John chapter 5, verses 28 through 29, Jesus says, do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise to live, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned. So we're going to talk more about that belief of the final resurrection in the last video in this series, which will be video number 8. But as we read today in John chapter 11, I want you to remember that this resurrection of Lazarus sticks out from all the others. So all these others, the 3 in the Old Testament, the 2 that Jesus raises from the dead, and these 2 are later in the New Testament. Some of the apostles, Peter and Paul, each raised someone from the dead, and it's recorded in the Bible. So all of these people were raised to life shortly after they had died. and their bodies had not yet been buried. Lazarus sticks out because he was dead and had been buried for 4 days. Jesus had been buried for 3 days, and then all of these holy people had probably been buried for months or years before they were risen from the dead. So Lazarus sticks out from the rest of these, but Lazarus fits in with the rest of these little gray guys because Lazarus would eventually die again. Jesus' resurrection is more like the final resurrection in that he does not die again. He is raised to new life. And we're not really sure what happened to these holy people after they rose from the dead, whether they died again or whether they just kind of went with Jesus into heaven or what's going on there. So anyway, let's read John chapter 11. And we're going to start at verse 17. Jesus has heard that Lazarus was sick. He didn't come right away, even though Lazarus was his friend and he was good friends with Lazarus' sister, both his sisters, Mary and Martha. And so we're jumping in that Jesus has now come to visit them and Lazarus has already died. So here we go. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," said Martha to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." The resurrection of Lazarus isn't the same as the final resurrection, but it does point toward Jesus' resurrection and then toward the final resurrection. Jesus demonstrates by raising Lazarus from the dead that he does have power over death and that death does not have the final word. In part 8, we'll talk a little bit more about the hope of the final resurrection, but today I want to leave you with hope for this life. In this video series, I've chosen to do the I am statements of Jesus in order. So these have been in chronological order so far, and I've kind of mixed up the order of the miracles in order to fit those in with the order of the I am statements. So today I want to point out that the resurrection of Lazarus is the 7th miracle that's leading up to the resurrection of Jesus. If we'd been doing the miracles in order, we would have already seen how that Jesus has the power to heal every sickness, every disease, every injury, every disability, every deformity. Jesus has the power to heal all of those things. And now, in the resurrection of Lazarus, we see that Jesus even has the power to raise Lazarus back from the dead, to raise us back from the dead. So the good news that I have to share with you today is that nothing is beyond God's reach. There's nothing that you can do, and nothing that can happen to you, and nothing that anyone can do to you that will put you beyond God's reach. God can redeem you. God can heal you. God can open your eyes and your heart. Jesus can change your life now. You do not have to wait for the final resurrection to experience new life. God has a plan for your life, and if he can bring Lazarus back from the dead, he can bring you back from wherever you are. The song that I want to share with you today is another one of my favorites. It's about how sometimes, even though our bodies are alive, we aren't really living. Sin and evil bring death into our lives, and into our hearts and into our minds. But even when Lazarus had died and was buried and his life was over, Jesus came to his tomb and called him out by name. Jesus has come to you, no matter where you are, and he is calling your name. Listen to his voice and let him bring you to life again.